Hello everyone. Relatively recently, cars with obviously specially brought to external corrosion elements of the body have become more and more common on the city streets. And if at that time I did not even know about the existence of such a direction in tuning, I immediately guessed that it was probably done on purpose, then people of the older generation most often cannot even admit the thought that someone did this to their car intentionally. I remember there was some kind of family holiday, and one of the relatives, just a representative of the older generation, came up to me and said, "Can you imagine, Andre? Yesterday I was driving to work and I saw, standing at the intersection, but it seemed to be a decent car, beautiful wheels, such big ones. And imagine, a completely rusty hood, and such rust as if it had been lying in some ditch for 10 years. What, has everything in the country become so bad that a person cannot put a normal hood on himself?" When I told him that, most likely, it was done on purpose and you just came across a car in the red style, there was no limit to your surprise. "So you want to say that the man had a normal hood?" My relative continued, "and the man himself deliberately removed the paint from it, waited until it rusted, and now drives and is proud of it. How and who could even think of this?" My relative continued to be perplexed, and that, by the way, is an excellent question. Well, let's try to figure it out. Our story starts in America in the 30s, where the construction of hot rods begins to become a very popular occupation. Of course, one of the reasons for creating a car of this kind is the desire to participate in races. Since the main goal for many was primarily victory, hot rods were literally made of, and sticks at that time, there was often neither time nor money for appearance. Therefore, the lion's share of hot rods of all years were masterpieces of engineering thought for their time from a technical point of view, but visually they looked like haphazardly attached parts from a junkyard. Over time, the attraction of building hot rods began to reach a more professional level with completely different budgets, where the appearance began to be paid no less attention than the technical component. And by that time, not everyone had the desire to race along the Drexel Strip. Many began to prefer to simply gather at all sorts of car shows, and hot rods and muscle cars became more and more glamorous. And, perhaps, the original look of hot rods would have remained forgotten, if not for a guy named Jim. Jake Jacobs was one of the co-owners of the Hot Rod Workshop. While pondering what car to present on behalf of his shop at the 1987 auto show, he came up with the idea to go back to basics. Over the years of building classic cars, the backyard of the shop had accumulated a huge number of useless spare parts, essentially just rotting in the open air. So he decided, like in the good old days, to build a hot rod from what was available. As a result, he got some kind of hybrid of a Ford Fuon and a Ford A, which was driven by a small block from a Chevy. Almost no work was done on the body, and the interior had only a steering wheel and 2 seats. In the summer of 1987, Jim drove this car to the Good Guy West Coast Nationals Auto Show. He proudly parked his car among expensive and shiny co-rods from the most famous shops. The car Jim created stood out from the rest so much that it immediately attracted a lot of attention. The excitement around Jim and his unusual hot rod was so great that the first place was given to him, and with the victory a new trend for a shabby appearance was launched. Soon hot rods made in this style began to be called retro rods. The retro rod style gradually began to be adopted by other car styles, but it took root best in wall culture. The recipe for the style we are talking about today is approximately as follows. We take, well, some old Volkswagen, add a drop of STN, a spoonful of retro style on top, a pinch of clean look, and we get that very look. Perhaps the main feature of this style is the inevitable resonance between the exterior shabby with life and the engine compartment restored to a more than ideal condition. Ideal, as if it had just left the factory chassis and with a chic interior. And all this on discs, the price of which at first glance exceeds the cost of the car. But why has this style become so popular? I think the main reason is that it is quite easy to hide the lack of sufficient funds behind the screen of this direction in car styling. But judge for yourself. No matter what anyone says, but to artificially age, and in some cases simply not touch what time has already done for you, is much easier and hundreds of times cheaper than to bring the appearance to at least a more or less good condition. Regarding the ideal underhood space, it is even easier, since you simply do not have to open the hood in public. As for the chassis, yes, who even sees it? Of course, you will still have to go broke on the disc, but here, as an alternative solution, welded tires can come to the rescue. Therefore, if you are a young guy or girl, and you only have enough money for an old bucket and to maintain it in working order, but you still really want to stand out from the crowd, masking the real state of affairs using elements of the red look style, which do not require special financial investments, may not be the worst option. Because in this case, you can proudly answer to any crap on your car that it is a red look. Where did this name come from? There are several theories on this account. The first one says that RED is an abbreviation that stands for Recycled Automotive Transport. This is the name for cars that have already been in a landfill, but the most popular version is that the appearance of the word red is associated with a character drawn by Ed Roth. The character was a goofy green careless rat, often sitting behind the wheel of a cartoonish hot rod. In honor of her, they began to call this style look rat look. What do I think about this? It's good that it exists. After all, with taste and creative thinking, you can create a truly unusual and terribly beautiful car relatively inexpensively. And that's all from me. Have a great mood everyone and see you soon. Bye.